All right. Well, I'm here with Brent Maddin from Arizona State University. How you doing, Brent? Thanks for coming.
I'm great, Tyler. Thanks for having me.
Well, to start, could you just explain your role at ASU and the work you do?
So at Arizona State University, I am lucky enough to sit within the Lou Fulton Teachers College and am the executive director of what we like to call the Next Education Workforce Initiative. And in a nutshell, we work with schools and school systems across the country to reimagine, redesign what their staffing models look like. And in a nutshell, it's moving from single teachers of record to teams of record.
That's interesting. I hear from a lot of folks, a lot of conversation about the teacher shortage. What's your perspective on what's going on with staffing in the education world?
So I really appreciate that question. The idea of a teacher shortage. I mean, you talk to someone that's tried to staff a physics classroom in rural America, and they'll be like, "Oh, that's like not a new problem," or anyone that's ever tried to find a special educator, right? This is again not a new problem. That said, if we interview superintendents and building level leaders across the country, they will unambiguously say things like, "We have not seen a shortage of applicants, a shortage of teachers like this in a really long time. We used to have 200 people applying for a position, and now we have 2 or none." And so this idea of a teacher shortage is incredibly real. And I would challenge us to, instead of thinking of this as just the teacher shortage problem, what if in fact we actually have a workforce design problem?
And what does that mean? A design problem about the workforce?
So right now, almost all of our schools are staffed in almost exactly the same way. And you in your mind's eye could walk with me down almost any hallway in an American school. You imagine the door, right? It swings open. There's one teacher and like 25 students.
Yeah.
And that might be true all day in an elementary school or until some Pavlovian bell rings in secondary, right? And the teacher stays in the room and the kids rotate it, right? And almost all of our schools are built that way. Our staffing models are built that way. And what I would say is I'm not convinced that that's good for teachers or that's good for learners. That instead, imagine what it would be like if you as a teacher had, other people on a team where you could have distributed expertise, where you didn't have to be all things to all people at all times. And if you're a learner, right, imagine being able to go to multiple educators, that you might have better relationships with some of them than others, or some might be particularly good at helping you unstick in this particular subject. If we're serious about student-centered learning, if we're serious about meeting the needs of all of our learners, I'm not sure that we could ask one person to be responsible for all of that all of the time.
Sure. So what do we do about this sort of persistent model of education that we have, where that it is that one teacher to 25 students sort of thing?
I mean, you're getting at what I think of as, and educational historians, Larry Cuban, David Tyke, have written about this idea of the grammar of schooling, right? This thing that is really hard to change, and it's just the way that it is. And the way that we staff our schools, I think, is an aspect of the grammar of schooling. And in fact, almost all of us, with rare exception, grew up in exactly the same sort of model. And so the power of a single example, a counterexample to this dominant narrative goes a really long way. So in Arizona, one of the things that we started with 5-6 years ago was building what we think of as lighthouse schools that are staffed differently, and then inviting other educators, school leaders, members of the community, the funders to come in, legislators, to come in and actually experience school in a different way with a different staffing model. And so 5-6 years ago, we were in a single school, 3 educators, 85 kids. This year, we're working with about 20,000 students in these team-based models in about 100 schools in 13 states. And I attribute it to people being able to actually challenge this grammar of schooling, in part because we actually have real live examples where people can walk the halls, talk to teachers, talk to kids. And more than anything else, it's one of these things where if it's a good idea, people pick it up and it
Sure.
spreads.
Yeah, I can imagine that, without that example, I can imagine there'd be so many people who would say, well, that would never work. You can't. It was, I went to, like you said, I went to school like that and it worked. I turned out all right.
Yeah, exactly. And the coolest thing about it, I mean, there are many things that we're finding, and we could talk about the outcomes if we wanted, but more than that, when you're in the schools and you're talking to the educators and you're talking to the kids, you hear them talking about having more autonomy.
Hmm.
You hear them talking about, I feel less lonely in my
Sure.
work. Imagine, and some of this connects to the larger pathways work,
Mhm.
right? About how we're entering the profession and teacher residencies. And some of the work that we're doing at Arizona State is that we're taking our new teachers, our rookie teachers, our pre-service and recently inducted teachers, and we're placing them in these team-based models.
Sure.
And it is such a wildly and radically different way to enter the profession.
Sure. Yeah. I've from conversations I've had and from my familiarity with the pathways work, it seems there's a lot of challenges facing teacher preparation programs and teachers about to enter the field. What are you doing in your work, or what do you see from your work as the challenges facing these educators and the programs?
I mean, one of the first challenges right out of the gate, right, is that when you interview parents, we do this in the Phi Delta Kappan survey that comes out every couple of years. We ask families, parents, would you want your own child to be a teacher?
Oh, wow.
37% of parents say yes, and the vast majority say no. There are mentor teachers, people that are working with our residents and others. This is clearly not everyone, but enough that it's on my radar screen that even when they're working with pre-service teacher candidates, they're saying things to them like, hey, I don't know. Like, I don't know if you should, are you sure you want to be a teacher?
Mm-hmm.
So the first problem, right, is that we have a culture that's literally telling people not to go into this work.
Wow. Yeah.
And so, well, why is that? I mean, obviously teacher pay is something, but like, I'm not convinced, right? People know what the salaries are. We need to raise teacher salary, full stop. And I'm not convinced that it's just that. I think that a lot of it gets back to the working conditions.
Sure.
Which turns out to be like pretty key in any job. Right. And so this idea of entering a profession, again, where you're responsible for all of these things, meeting the needs of 25, 30, 35 unique learners every single day, and doing that work alone is really hard. And I think that if the pandemic taught us anything, right, a couple big lessons. The first of which is that people like more flexibility. Teaching is one of the most inflexible, as currently conceived, one of the most inflexible jobs on the planet, right? Like you literally can't even go to the bathroom when you need to as a teacher, right? Much less like go to your own child's, individualized education meeting or, a performance of one of your own kids.
Sure.
Right. So that's one, is like there's no flexibility. And then the second thing I think the pandemic taught us, and this is also a generational shift, people don't like to work alone. The idea of working as a member of a team where we're all able to bring our unique superpowers, our distributed expertise to the work, to the problem, to the craft.
Sure.
Like there's something really powerful about that. And right now we just expect teachers to do it all and do it all beautifully. But what if we actually question these fundamental grammars of schooling?
Sure.
And change the way that we brought adults around young people?
That's fascinating. It makes me think of the business world where you have, these, and it seems like it's to your point, constantly changing.
You're in marketing or something? Like, what are you? You're like, your expertise is in marketing, right?
I
like,
mean,
and you bring that to
sure
all of the conversations.
Yeah.
We're not expecting you to be awesome at IT, or maybe they are, but like, right? Like, this is not the way that most people actually organize themselves.
Yeah. I mean, there's constantly new organizational models being discussed, being tried out, whether you're, I remember a couple of years ago, the hot new thing in business was the Scrum model.
Yep.
And whatever, there's constantly new things being tried. And, and it also makes me think that right now the conventional wisdom is, to be an effective manager, you're a manager of 7 people. And, comparing that to the 1 to 25 teacher to student thing that you're describing.
Or even a building level leader, a principal, right?
Mm-hmm.
Most of them are responsible for managing 20, 25, 30 individual teachers. And so even imagine in this team-based model where each team has a team lead, right? And then our building level leaders are actually working with not 24 educators or 30 educators, but 7.
Yeah.
Right. And that those 7 are working with their teams. And so there's ways to also make the job, I think, of building level leaders more sustainable. Again, all of this gets back to this fundamental notion of teams, not individual teachers of record.
Sure. Earlier, you mentioned the ASU's Strategic School Staffing Summit. Could you tell us a bit more about it?
Yeah. So this is just hosted the 6th annual. We had about 650 people that joined online. It's a 2-day event where we really dig into this single topic around how might we think differently about the way we staff our schools. And it's, one of my favorite things about it is that it's a big tent event, right? Where we have represent about 1/3 of the people come from schools or school systems. Another 1/3 are coming from what I would think of as nonprofits or technical assistance providers that are doing work in schools and school systems. And then the other 1/3 are a mix of higher ed, policy folks, philanthropists, people that are thinking about the larger systems and infrastructure involved in the way that we staff our schools.
And in addition to the staffing summit, how is ASU's Mary Lou Fulton Teachers College meeting the challenge of these, stagnant preparation programs or the confusion of people trying to decide what do we do with apprenticeships and residencies, and how are you meeting that challenge?
Yeah, I think that about this in 2 really concrete ways that are all undergirded by I have so much pride in working for ASU, and in part because we have this charter, which is not that common necessarily for a public institution of higher learning. And part of this charter, right, says that we will be an institution measured by who we include as opposed to who we exclude, and how well those people do when they're with us. And this idea of a truly inclusive environment, that making higher ed and continued lifelong learning just part and parcel of what everyone is entitled to, I think is a really, really powerful, and not some, but all, right? And so with that sitting in the background, I think our teacher prep program is doing a couple of really important and pretty path-breaking things. The first of which is, up to this point, most teacher preparation programs have almost no choice for people that are pursuing teaching credentials. The programs are often very tight, very stacked.
Sure.
And we've introduced the idea of voice and choice into our program. It turns out that that's also what we're encouraging our teachers to do with their young learners, right? Make the learning more personalized. Let the students see themselves in the curriculum, right?
Sure.
Like figure out. And then we turn around and offer them a lockstep program where there's no voice, no choice for the teachers, right? It's sort of ironic.
That's interesting.
And so now, in part because, again, if the idea is that we have teams of educators wrapping around shared common rosters of kids, and that those educators can have superpowers, why not also let our current students develop those sort of superpowers so that when they're leaving, not only are they good at being an elementary school teacher, but they also have deep expertise in 1, 2, or 3 really specific areas, right? Like data analysis or working with families or trauma-informed instruction, right?
Yeah.
And that they can take pride in that. And the second piece is that we've got to stop having student teachers work for free. And so one of the places that we're really innovating is to think differently about what are the panoply of jobs that could be available for people in our teacher prep program, not just in their senior year, but starting as early as their freshman year. And if we ask our school district partners in combination, in cooperation with our school system partners, hey, what would be the other roles that you might be interested in having our students play
Mhm.
And might we find some money to help to pay for them? Roles like tutors or roles like a digital learning facilitator, or right, where you can start to develop the skills and more importantly, be working like closely with young people. And so now our college has really taken this upon ourselves to say, hey, instead of asking people to go out and get a job at the Gap or Home Depot or wherever to like help to subsidize your cost of being in college, what if you could actually do that in the actual career in which you're interested in pursuing?
Wow.
And how can you make money doing that? And so some of this is like, it really gets down to partnership.
Mhm.
And if higher ed can get out of our own way, right, and start to really engage with our school system partners to build something that makes sense for us, makes sense for them, and most importantly, makes sense for both of our sets of students, we're bound to win.
Yeah, it sounds like everyone wins in that scenario. Um, if for folks who are listening to all this and um, excited about the opportunity of things changing, and uh, what would you say you want people to take from this conversation and chew on and move forward with?
Yeah, if I could offer a single sentence and then an invitation. The single sentence would be something like, let's stop just talking about a teacher shortage problem,
Hmm.
and let's instead start asking questions about, could this be a workforce design problem?
Right.
And then the invitation would be, don't take my word for this. Like, come and visit. We host site visits about once a month where you can come and you can walk the halls of schools that have built radically different staffing models. You can talk to students that are learning in these models. You can talk to the educators, the building level leaders, the principals. And if this is something that makes sense, join the movement.
Hmm.
Like, seriously, like we are honest to goodness trying to bring people together who are interested in thinking really differently about the way that we staff American public schools.
That's fantastic. Brent, appreciate your time. Thank you for coming.
Tyler, this has been so fun. Thank you.